So back to the corridor. I'm supposed to roll on a d20 for ruin encounter, which is here. So let's see, what do I end up with? There's a 14. There will be a Rust Shambler. Let's have a look at the Rust Shambler's stats. Alright, so we're here on page 104. So Rust Shamblers, an animated mass of corroded metal and synthetic flesh. For health, attack is easy, defense rating is easy, constitution of easy, strength easy, willpower very hard, dexterity easy. There are 3 of them, and there's 1 XP granted. Perception is average, and it is a construct. So special attacks, acid spit, nearby d4 damage, special attack, corrosive touch, and target suffers 1 damage per round for the next 4 rounds. This is cumulative. Loot, there will be none. Alright, so I'm confronted with 3 Rust Shamblers in this corridor, which I will need to deal with. Before we get into combat proper, there are some rules that we will need to follow in terms of the combat sequence. So first of all, for combat, it will be broken down into turns and rounds. I will have, for example, of a standard combat round with 3 Rust Shamblers would be perhaps the player character goes first, followed by Rust Shambler 1. Turn 3 will be Rust Shambler 2, and Rust Shambler 3 will be on turn 4. So together this would form the entire round, and round 2 will see a repeat of 4 turns for 1 turn for each player character slash non-player character. Before we get into combat, there are 2 things we need to find out. Number 1, if there will be a surprise attack, or we would just go straight into initiative check. If I do have an option to choose this, I will be running an opposed check, which is dexterity versus perception. In this case of a PC sneaking up on an NPC. So I'm gonna reference it to the DTN, which is something more dynamic. And the point being that I think the TN is pretty straightforward, and that will be the default table. But to have a more interesting look at it, I'll be using the DTN. So that will be 0. I'm on 0, and perception is average. So average, I will need to roll a dynamic target number of 11 to pass this surprise check. So I'm gonna roll on my D20. I roll a, that looks like a single digit. Oh, that's a 17. So that's a pass. So I roll a pass. If I were to reference it to the TN, we can also have a look at that. So if I were to roll on a TN table, and if it's on average, I will need to roll a 14 to pass, which means to say I would have passed the surprise check as well if I were to be rolling on the TN table. Right, so for high rolls, not an issue, but if you are rolling low, or if you have a low modifier, then I think the DTN may help. So my player character will go first. The site surprising can choose their initial starting combat zone as explained on page 28. So in combat, there's also the separation of combat zones, which is stated over here. So in 3 different zones: engaged, nearby, or far away. So engaged would be up close, close combat. There will be melee attack. Nearby and far away would be, I presume, some distance away where ranged spells and ranged weapons be really useful. So in this case, if I do have something that is ranged, if I do have a ranged spell, which I don't, or a ranged weapon, which I do have a composite bow, but I don't have any arrows, so I can't use that anyway. So in this case, I would have to go with melee attack. So I would go on, I would be choosing going up on the engaged combat zone to take the first strike. In terms of the actions, that would be what I can do in a combat round. Free action, which costs nothing to use. They are usually small, inconsequential acts, speaking few words, dropping an item, or swapping weapons. These are examples of free actions. Or I can do a move action to move across combat zones nearer or further away from the monster, provided they are not engaged in melee combat. Or I can make a standard action, which is the call of the action round. So this would be, I imagine, the attack. So combat actions are all listed over here. I can do a standard attack. I can do maneuvers, which is pretty interesting. I can charge, create opening, disarm, grapple, push, trip, wide swing. So I imagine this will tap into the various attributes of your character. Depending on which are the stronger attributes that you have, you may be able to use that. For example, if I have a very high strength, which my character has, he has a +1 amongst the rest of his attributes, he might go for a grapple, and he will be required to do a strength check, which will lead to the grapple target being restrained, and I presume that will enable him to have some sort of advantage over the monster. For creatures, they do not roll any dice, so instead my PC will roll a d20 plus my PC's DR and compare it to the attacker's attack value. If the result is equal or higher than the attacker's attack, they have managed to avoid the strike. So it's more of like a defensive check. In terms of my feats and drawbacks, they are not really useful for my combat. I have stealthy as my feat, and I have a slow as my drawback, which is kind of weird, but that's fine. All in all, it will just trickle down to the mathematical part of the game. So I roll a, oh gosh, I roll a 8. That's a fail, so I have missed. So I'm on turn 2, which is Rust Shambler 1's turn. And in this case, I won't be rolling for the creature as mentioned in the chapter. What I will be doing is that I will be comparing the attack of the Rust Shamblers, which is under an easy, versus my defense rating, which is a -1 and a +3, because my player character has a chain shirt on, giving him a total of 2 for defense rating. I will be looking over here at the modifier of 2 under easy, so I will need to roll an 11 to successfully block the creature's attack. So I roll a 6. These are really poor rolls. So I roll a 6. That would mean that I have failed the DTN and the creature hits me. Over here, there's standard and special attack. So as you can see over here under enemy combat actions, there are specific actions that the enemy will take at full health and on 50% or less health. So right now the 3 Rust Shamblers are all at 100% health, so I will roll on the enemy action to determine if he strikes or if it strikes me with a standard attack or a special attack. So I'll roll on a d10. So I roll on a 10. That's a special attack. Special attack would be Corrosive Touch, engaged. Yes, the target suffers 1 damage per round for the next d4 rounds. This is cumulative. So I'm going to roll on the d4 to determine how many rounds I suffer the corrosive attack. So that's 2 rounds. So every round for the next 2 rounds, I will suffer 2 damage for the next round, and on last round, I will take 3 damage. Now let's look at Rust Shambler 2. I roll on a 13, so that's a successful defense, so no damage dealt. And on turn 4, which is the 3rd Rust Shambler, I'm gonna roll it again. I roll a, is that a 17? That's a 17, so that's a pass. So no damage dealt by the last 2 Rust Shamblers. Okay, That's a pretty tricky first round. Let's go on to round 2 while my PC will do his attack. Alright, so here we go. I roll a 10. That's a successful hit. And let's check out how much damage would I inflict on the Rust Shambler. So I roll that's a 8. When a PC deals damage, they must roll the weapon's damage and add their strength modifier for melee weapons. Okay, so it seems I need to add a modifier. My player character's weapon is a Maul. It's under heavy and it has d12 damage. It's two-handed. So the way I'm interpreting from here would be my d12 roll, which is an 8 plus my modifier, which is a +1. That will be a total of 9 damage, effectively killing the very first Rust Shambler. So the second turn will go to the second Rust Shambler. We roll on the d20. I roll a 5, doesn't look too good. I would have to roll an 11 to evade. I roll a 9. That's a special attack again. Corrosive touch. Okay, again, I will suffer 1 damage per round for the next d4 rounds. Let's roll on a d4. To roll a 2. That's 2 rounds. So in total, I will be suffering 1 damage again from this particular turn. So that's the end of turn 2, and turn 3, that will be Rust Shambler 3's turn. Again, I'm going to roll on a d20. I roll a 11, which is a successful check, which means no damage dealt to my player character. Now, I'm at the end of my round 2, and I will need to resolve the damage that was dealt by the very first Rust Shambler. This is cumulative, so this will be a 2 damage in this case. So I will need to minus another 2 health points from my character. So at the end of round 2, my player character is down to 15 points out of a 22 health points. Alright, so now let's go on to round 3. Let's hope that we can pick down 1 more Rust Shambler before my character's health points really drops to a critical level. So let's roll for the attack check. I roll a 11, so that's a successful hit. D12 to resolve the damage dealt. So there's a 3 damage from the Maul, and I would be required to add the strength modifier of +1, so that's a total of 4 damage, effectively killing the Rust Shambler 2. So I will have only 1 Rust Shambler left. So the turn 2 will be Rust Shambler 3's turn. Let's roll on a d20. Let's roll a 8. I don't think I passed this. So looking at my total defense rating of 2, and under attack of easy, I'll be required to roll a 9. So I roll an 8, so just 1 point below. That's too bad. And now let's roll for the Rust Shamblers. So I roll a 2, that's a standard attack, which is fortunately acid speed nearby, d4 damage. So in either case, I'm in engaged combat zone, so it doesn't really matter. So I will roll on a d4. Oops, what's that? Okay, that's 3. I roll a 3, so that's a 3 damage dealt to my player character, bringing him down to 12 out of 22 health points. So that concludes round 3, but don't forget, I will need to resolve the corrosive touch effects from the first 2 Rust Shamblers. That will be a -3 from the first Rust Shambler, and the second Rust Shambler would be dealing him a 2 damage. So in total, that would be a total of 7 damage dealt to my character, bringing his health down to 5 out of 22 points. 5 out of the 22 health points, so that is getting really critical. I will be required to kill this last Rust Shambler, otherwise I will be in really deep trouble. So if I want to disengage, I may. That would be to move across a combat zone further away from the creature. So looking at the other options for standard attack that favors my character, I could grapple, because I have a +1 modifier for grapple, so it requires me to do a strength versus strength check, and the grapple target is restrained. The afflicted is wrapped in something that restricts their movement. They're incapable of moving, and any action that imply movement, such as attacking, suffer disadvantage. A PC defending from the attack of a restrained NPC has advantage. Resolution: in their turn, the restrained PC can attempt an average strength check. NPCs and monsters make a simple check with the TN12 during their turn as a standard action. So being restrained gives the affected monster, so I'm not going to go for that. I will go for something that is more direct and we can resolve it within the same round. So I'm not going to do restraint. In this case, having such a low health point, I would be more inclined to deal direct damage to the creature, but let's have a look at the rest. So I can also do a push, and if you hit, you can make a strength versus strength check to push a target from engaged to nearby. Then again, playing with combat range within the combat zone. So I can trip. There will be dexterity, which I have a dexterity of -1, which I'm not going to do that. Or I can attempt a wide swing. You perform a standard attack shifted up in an attempt to hit not only the target but any other enemy combatant within melee range. Damage roll is spread among all eligible targets. This would have been great if I were to do it in the very early part of the game, but looking at my rolls, it's been pathetic. I've only got 1 or 2 really good rolls, so I think this is not applicable now either. Or I can do a create opening, which is after a successful attack, you can choose to deal half your usual damage in order to reduce the target's DR by 1 stage. The next attack of the same target so by dealing half my damage, I'm getting an exchange for reducing the target's DR by 1 stage. So that's also a calculated move. So I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to go for a standard attack. Hopefully we are able to terminate this rusted Shambler, this last rusted Shambler standing. So let's roll on a d20. So I roll a 19. Fantastic. I think I will be successful in this check. So looking back at the dynamic target numbers again, I'm looking at a total modifier of 1 and easy under the enemy's DR. So I'm supposed to roll a 10. So in this case, I roll a 19. That's a successful hit. And next, I will resolve by rolling my d12. So I roll a 6. That's more than enough to completely neutralize the enemy. So I've got a 6 plus my modifier of 1 from my strength. So that's a total of 7 damage dealt to the last Rust Shambler. I will need to reconcile the very last effect. It was from the corrosive touch from the second Rusted Shambler. This will be the end of the 2 rounds that he's supposed to suffer the damage. So in this case, he will suffer a -3 again, effectively bringing down my player character's health to 2 upon 22. Let's see if we can do any recovery of sorts. Let's have a look at the core rules. So, death and healing. When a PC, NPC, or monsters reaches 0 health, they are dead. A character can make a hard intelligence check to attempt to heal another creature or character or themselves if they are not unconscious. If successful, they recover d4 health plus their constitution modifier. This can only be done once per day and requires medical supplies. So if I were to go down to 0 health, I will still have a chance of coming back, getting back in the game. So in the second part of this, it says, after a meal and a full night's rest, characters regain lost health equal to a d8 plus their constitution modifier. Resting at a safe haven for 3 or more days restores all lost health. I am going to set up camp in this part of the ancient ruin. I'm going to have a meal, which means to say I'm going to consume a ration, and I'm going to rest for at least 6 hours. And that will help me to regain my lost health equal to a d8 plus my constitution modifier. At this point, I think I have fully exhausted what I can do in terms of exploration. I have already done an exploration in the ruin. We have tried to decipher the message behind, or the meaning, or the reason behind why he was being bounty hunted. And I think that should pretty much be considered as a pretty interesting session. So, till next time. If there are any particular parts where I have made a mistake, please feel free to let me know. Or if there are things that you love to see or your comments, please feel free to drop them down in my comment section. So, till next time.